All right. Alex, Neve, so much pleasure given to me for you to spend a few minutes with us during this time of COVID to talk about Amnesty International, its work, Amnesty International Canada, and specifically with respect to the issue of the International Criminal Court and Canada's respect there. Alex, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us.
Well, thank you, Peter. Obviously, we appreciate the opportunity as well. These are important issues, and it's good to continue to focus on issues like this in this difficult and trying COVID-related time when obviously a lot of attention is focused elsewhere.
Alex, about 3 weeks ago, there was a very strong statement that came from Amnesty International in support of the work of the International Criminal Court. The chief prosecutor had in December announced her intent to examine Israel for potential war crimes, had referred that to a whole question about legal jurisdiction. And in the wake of that, Israel had put a active campaign out to try to sideline this, and Amnesty International put out a statement. Maybe you can just review for me what their position was.
Well, they're certainly very supportive of the prosecutor's decision to pursue this investigation. Obviously, we're now waiting for a ruling at her request from the court's pretrial chamber with respect to the territorial jurisdiction of her investigation. But obviously, she has signaled that it is her intent to go forward, and that's very important. We say that's important because for years, decades, in fact, Amnesty has been highlighting that one of the major impediments to human rights protection in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory is the entrenched culture of impunity, the failure to ensure that the many serious human rights violations, war crimes, crimes against humanity that have been carried out over many, many years have never been properly investigated, perpetrators not brought to justice and held accountable, and therefore we constantly see repetition of those crimes because there's never been a price, there's never been an accounting in the past. For about the last 10 years, Amnesty in our campaigning has been highlighting that the International Criminal Court in particular provides an appropriate and very effective forum to finally do something about justice and accountability. And then when the state of Palestine acceded to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court in 2015, that suddenly opened up all sorts of new possibilities. So the statement from our international office, which is a statement on behalf of the entire Amnesty movement, it certainly is a statement therefore on behalf of us in Amnesty Canada as well, highlights what an important development that is, expresses serious concern about the fact that a number of other countries, including, it would seem, Canada, have objected to the prosecutor pursuing this investigation and have stressed instead that it's very important that all states that are parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court lend their full support to this investigation going ahead.
So, Alex, you bring me here to my second sort of issue there, that you wrote a letter to Prime Minister Trudeau. Tell me a little bit about your understanding of how Canada has positioned itself. Canada was one of the founders, very proud of being one of the instigators of the ICC. It contributed money to it. But now, are you very happy with the way Canada is positioning itself on this issue?
Happiness would not be how I would describe it. We're deeply concerned and considerably disappointed. We wrote the letter with the Special Rapporteur, Professor Michael Link, in February because after the prosecutor had announced her decision, her intent to pursue an investigation in December, the Israeli government reacted very strongly and made it clear that it was opposed to this, and also urged other states, and we know that included a direct appeal to Canada, to intervene with the court on behalf of Israel, asserting that same position. In other words, that the investigation shouldn't go ahead.
My understanding is that actually Prime Minister Netanyahu actually apparently phoned Prime Minister Trudeau to make some kind of appeal in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. It was direct and personal. There's no question, and I think it was made with an intention, an expectation that Canada would be on board and that Canada would take Israel's side here. We were very concerned that that not happen. First and foremost, going back to my earlier comments, we think it's important that the investigation goes ahead and that all states are lending support towards that goal. But furthermore, Canada's views here matter a great deal because, as you noted earlier, Canada, right from the very beginning, back in 1998, when governments first agreed that they were going to create the International Criminal Court, Canada was a leader under Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy at the time. We were instrumental to finally having the International Criminal Court after decades of waiting for a body like that to be created. Canada's leadership was essential, and we've been a strong supporter of the court in the more than 20 years since then. And so it's particularly important that Canada be on the right side of this issue, not be seen as blocking an effort to ensure international justice, but be a strong supporter. So that's why in mid-February, Professor Link and Amnesty International, me personally, wrote to the government urging that we not take the action that the Israeli government was wanting, and instead that we show our support for this investigation.
Alex, when I discussed this issue with unnamed senior officials with the Canadian government a couple of weeks ago, their position is, well, Canada is actually taking the same position now we have from the beginning, that I can't remember the exact wording, but that they would want the ICC to pursue potential war crimes in states where they have jurisdiction. But the fact that Palestine is not recognized as a state therefore means that we would not support this, and it's not because of any particular animus or predisposition on it, that we are just following our regular position that we've had for the last 10 years. That seemed to, how would you react to that?
Well, when the state of Palestine did accede to the Rome Statute in January of 2015, in other words, made it clear to the international community that they were prepared to be bound by the International Criminal Court. It's true at that time that the Canadian government, and of course in January 2015, this was the previous government of Prime Minister Harper, did go on record and file a formal objection indicating that Canada did not accept that the state of Palestine had the jurisdiction to become a party to the Rome Statute. Notably, Canada was the only government to file a formal objection at that time, which is one of the reasons why we're now arguing 5 years later that it's not appropriate for governments to be coming forward and objecting after the fact. The time to make clear objections, which we, I think, still would not have accepted, but nonetheless, the time would have been at the time that the state of Palestine was actually stepping forward and binding itself to the treaty. Just because Canada filed that objection in January 2015, number one, under an earlier government, so it's a different government, and different governments bring different positions and policies, so we would certainly urge and expect that the Trudeau government revisit that position, not simply cavalierly and blindly decide that they're going to follow it. But we also don't think that it's the proper decision. We think that there's strong basis in international law, including the fact that not only have states widely accepted and recognized the state of Palestine as a party to the Rome Statute, in fact, the state of Palestine has acceded to numerous international human rights treaties. This is not just that they chose one treaty to get on board with. They have made it clear over many years that they're prepared to be bound by and become parties to a whole range of international human rights treaties. So this is part of that wider pattern. And the key here should be ensuring that we are as expansively as possible trying to take meaningful action to counter impunity, to ensure that international justice will prevail. And that is the position that Canada should be asserting. And sadly, that is not the position that has been taken to date.
And if I understand correctly, that was the whole intent of creating an international criminal court, was going after those occasions where local governments, whatever sort, were not willing to do that.
Absolutely. The International Criminal Court is a court of last resort. It is absolutely meant to be the body that steps in and ensures that justice will be done, number one, for the most serious of crimes under international law, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide. But both war crimes and crimes against humanity are fully on the table here. And notably, this is not only about the Israeli government. The prosecutor has made it very clear that the investigation would extend to serious concerns about crimes against humanity or war crimes being committed by Palestinian armed groups through the indiscriminate firing of rockets into Israel. So this is not singling out Israel. This is about ensuring that any and all war crimes and crimes against humanity by either side of the conflict in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, in Gaza, will be properly investigated, and any and all perpetrators tried and brought to justice. That's what's at stake here. And the International Criminal Court is a body that steps in when it's become clear that at national level, authorities are failing to deliver that kind of justice. And Amnesty International, the United Nations, and many others, through our documenting over years and decades, have made it very clear that there's a failure of justice at national level.
Alex Neve, Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada. You are well known in Canada for being a fearless defender of human rights, and here's another case. Thank you very much for spending a few minutes with the Canada Talks Israel Palestine.
Thanks very much, Peter.